let's go first to the findings. We were able to validate about 101.6 billion na rinelease ng DBM in the nature of VILP. Ito po yung para sa mga infrastructure projects. 12 billion naman po in PDAF, sabihin yung para sa soft, to the agencies covered in our audit, and 2.36 billion from allocations for financial assistance to LGUs and budgetary support to GOCCs. Meron din pong kaukulan na amounts na inilaan ang ating mga mambabatas para dito sa tinatawag na financial assistance. Ang VILP releases po ay kasama po dito sa 1.6 billion na sinabi ko kanina, ang isang amount na 20 million from the allocation of a certain Luis Abalos. Pero sa amin pong pagsusuri ay hindi naman po siya naging mambabatas during the 13th or 14th Congress. So hindi po namin malaman at hindi rin po ma-explika sa amin ng DBM kung papaano na ang isang tao na hindi naman mambabatas ng mga panahon na yon ay nairilisan pa rin ng, para sa parently proyekto in the amount of 20 million. Now, dito po sa binanggit ko na mga na-release, dun sa 12 billion na PDAF, na-audit po namin ang 8.374 billion. At doon naman po sa 101.6 billion na VILP, na-audit po namin ang 32.664 billion. These represent already 58% of the PDAF that was released to the agencies covered in the audits, as well as 32% of the VILP that was released nationwide. Okay? A total of 6.156 billion was transferred by the agencies. Ito, yung ahensya na yan, kanina binanggit to, to 82 non-government organizations. This came from the PDAFs of 12 senators and around 180 representatives. 10 of the NGOs, 10 of these 82, which received a total of 2.157 billion, are presently linked to Janet Lim Napoles. And 6 other NGOs, which received a total of 189 million in the aggregate, were found to have included legislators whose PDAF was transferred to these NGOs, o kaya isang relative nila ay incorporator ng isa sa mga 6 na NGOs na ito. Tungkol naman po sa infrastructure projects funded from VILP, about 1.4 billion were funded from the allocations of 3 senators and 6 representatives who were identified from the schedule of hard projects submitted by the DBM and from the records of the audited agencies, as well as from the allocations of several unidentified legislators. Bakit po ganito? Ang DBM po, hindi po makapagbigay sa amin ng listahan ng mga releases nila per legislator. At maski ho yung listahan nila ng VILP, ang listahan na binigay sa amin amounted to only 32 billion, pero nung kami po ay nagsumuri ng mga dokumento na nakuha rin namin sa kanila at saka sa mga ahensya, we came up with that 101.6 billion. So, hindi po namin malaman kung bakit ang records ng DBM noong mga panahon na yon ay ganon. parang we really had to go about restructuring the records so that we could reconcile at napag-alaman nga po namin ang lumabas sa aming audit, kulang-kulang po talaga yung mga binigay na impormasyon at listahan sa amin ng DBM. Anyway, yung releases naman to LGUs, ito na po yung financial assistance to LGUs, no, amounted to 2.034 billion, which was funded from the allocations of 14 senators and about 13 representatives. Again, we identified them from the records of the audited agencies. Some were also not identified at anuman po ang gawin namin, hindi na po talaga namin na-trace. Okay. The salient findings on the 4 focus areas, kasi nag-focus po kami sa 4 na areas dito. Babanggitin ko lang po, una, yung allocation of fund and monitoring by TBM of the releases. Pangalawa, yung implementation ng mga livelihood projects and other soft projects. Pangatlo, yung implementation of infrastructure projects. At pang-apat, yung pong financial assistance and other charges by LGUs. In respect po dun sa allocation of fund and monitoring of releases, ito na nga po yung nasabi ko kanina, lumabas po sa aming audit that the DBM failed to keep proper records of and to efficiently monitor the releases per legislator, such that could not provide us with a complete schedule despite repeated requests, no? So we had to rely on records of the agencies themselves as well as documents obtained also from the DBM. May mga dokumento pero parang hindi nila naayos o hindi nila na-i-reconcile dun sa mga listahan na binigay sa amin. So kami po ang nag-reconcile nun. This showed that 74 legislators significantly exceeded their respective allocations. Kanina po nabanggit natin na para sa mga senador, bale 200 million lahat po yung alokasyon nila, I mean per senator. Ang ating pong mga representatives naman ay 70. Pero doon po sa lumabas po sa aming audit, 74 po sa kanila ang tumanggap ng labis-labis doon sa 200 million kumbaga senator ka o 70 million kumbaga representative ka, no? Meron pa nga hong isa, no? And when we say labis-labis, no, makikita niyo po yan sa report namin in full, no? Hindi lang po 1 milyon, 5 milyon ang labis, no? Hundreds of millions, no? At meron pong isa tayong mambabatas na tumanggap ng halos 3 bilyon na alokasyon from PDAF. Tingnan mo na lang mamaya sa report, Joseph. Si Joseph, umihiling na. Diyos ko, bad trip si Joseph sa akin ngayon. Okay. Moreover, the funds were released for projects outside the legislative districts of sponsoring congressmen. Kumbaga, ang Joseph, o sige, tiga saan ka? Ng distrito ka? Quezon. Parang wala kaming nahagip na Quezon kasi Region 3, 5, ano kami? Okay. So, halimbawa, yung distrito sa Region 3, no? Isang distrito sa Region 3, yung congressman natin doon ay hindi lang sa kanyang distrito, example lang ito, no? Hindi lang sa kanyang distrito napunta ang kanyang alokasyon o yung kanyang PDAF na releases, kundi sa iba-iba pang distrito, no? Marami po silang naging ganyan ang kaso. At makikita niyo po ng buong-buo sa aming report mamaya. Okay. There were also no endorsements from the agencies to which the funds were released in violation of the TBM's own rules on the matter, nor was there any assessment of the capabilities of these agencies to implement the projects. The releases were made essentially at the behest of the sponsoring legislators. At ang mga implementing agencies po, ganun din ang kanilang sinasabi sa amin. So, kumbaga, yung mga ahensya, doon pinunta ang pera, turnaround, binigay po sa NGOs in respect of livelihood projects. So they simply turn around, and transferred the funds to the NGOs identified or selected by the legislators. Again, this runs counter to Resolution number 12-2007 of the Government Procurement and Policy Board na ngayon po ay Section 53J ng ating Implementing Rules of Republic Act 9184 o yung tinatawag nating Government Procurement Reform Act. No? So marami na po tayong nakitang mga paglabag ng batas at saka ng mga sariling regulasyon ng DBM. Huwag na ho natin isipin ng COA, sila ho mismo hindi nila nasundan ang kanilang mga sariling patakaran. Under the resolution the GPPB resolution that I mentioned a while ago, ang sinasaad po nito, funds may be transferred to NGOs for implementation when there is an appropriation or ordinance earmarking an amount to be specifically contracted out to NGOs. So kailangan po merong apropriasyon or ordinansya na nagbibigay authority, no, na pwedeng i-transfer ng implementing agency ang pondo sa isang NGO. Under the GAA po kasi, yung ang naka-specify po doon, no, halimbawa, ito ang menu. Ito yung mga saan pwedeng gamitin ng PDAF, yung tinatawag nating menu. Ini-specify po sa batas yan, no? Tapos, nakalagay din doon. So, sino ang implementing agency nitong proyektong ganito? Naka-specify din po. At tumigil na doon ang GAA. Hindi na po sinabi na, o sige, pwede niyong ibigay sa NGO, no? And neither, not one of the agencies could point to us any such appropriation or ordinance. Kasi baka naman, hindi rin namin alam, meron pala, no? Pero, wala rin naman po sa kanila ang nakapagturo sa amin na meron ngang a legal authority through an appropriation or an ordinance na aalaw sa kanilang mag-transfer ng mga pondo na yon sa mga NGOs. But even assuming the existence of appropriation or ordinance, the NGOs were not selected through competitive bidding as also required by the resolution. Ang mga ahensya, they merely relied on the endorsement of the legislators, some of whom, mga legislators po natin, dahil sinikap po talaga naming i-confirm sa kanila, no? Some of the legislators denied their participation or signatures in the letters and documents that we showed them. So yung pong ating mga implementing agencies, naturingan pong implementing pero hindi naman po nag-implement. They barely monitored the projects, if at all. Nonetheless, some of them even charge a management fee of about 3% of the alleged project cost. So, sa mga ibang ahensya, nagkaroon sila ng retention, hindi po nakaltasan ng 3%, 3.5 yata dun sa iba, at and that's what they kept also. Okay. The projects, supposed projects, the reported projects, were found to be grossly deficient in so many ways, casting doubt on whether they were carried at all, much more in the magnitude claimed by the NGOs, many of which were found to be of dubious existence. No? They were either unknown or could not be found at their given addresses. Pinuntahan po namin sila. Or have given non-existent addresses. Bibigay ng address, wala palang ganong kalye. Magbibigay ng number, yung pala wala naman palang ganong number. Dead end naman pala yun, yung mga tipong ganon, no? Or were traced to mere shanties, sa mga barong-barong at saka mga informal settlers communities, or high-end residences naman, mga condo, no? But which turned out to be not the offices of the NGO, but the residences of either the owner, an officer, o kamag-anak, or whatever. Lahat po ng detalyeng yan, ipapakita ko po sa inyo yung portion ng aming report where you can see that Kaya po pagkapal-kapal dahil inisa-isa po namin ang mga NGOs, 82 NGOs na ito. Halimbawa, ganito ho, makikita ninyo, yung sa ating report, may mga pictures pa kami, no? At marami ho yan. Mantakin ho ninyo, 82 NGOs, sinikat po namin puntahan lahat at i-validate kung sino nga ba sila, nasaan sila, at kung totoong may negosyo sila. The procurement of goods and services by the NGOs aggregating to billions of pesos were not made through public bidding. Kasi nung na-download ang pera sa kanila o na-transfer sa kanila, no, parang, they were free to spend it any way they wanted, no? Hindi kagaya kung nandyan pa yan sa gobyerno, sa isang ahensya ng gobyerno, marami pong patakaran na kailangang sundin, lalong-lalo na po yung mga rini-require ng ating Procurement Act, no? Isa na nga po yan, di ba? Yung bidding o negotiated procurement or etc. etc. Sa kamay po ng NGO, yung pera ng bayan na napunta sa kamay ng NGO ay hindi na po sinunod yung mga patakaran na yan, mga alituntunin na yan. Kaya po, kung kani-kanino po sila namili kunyari ng mga tanim, seedlings, trees, vermiculture kits, mostly agricultural, no? Many suppliers are the same for most of the NGOs. Meron silang mga favorites, no, na mga suppliers, no? Halos lahat ng NGOs doon sa kanila bumibili ng mga livelihood kits o kaya ng mga vermiculture, vermicomposting, etc. Mga seedlings ng sitaw, bataw, ganyan, malunggay, whatever, no? Meron pong mga lumulutang talaga na mga pangalan ng mga suppliers at pinuntahan din po namin sila, hiningan din po namin sila ng mga kumpirmasyon. Some of them denied transacting with the NGOs. Yung mga iba naman umamin na, oo, may mga binenta kami dyan sa mga NGOs na yan, pero hindi po milyon. Ito po yung resibo namin, no? 10,000 lang po yung valor ng kanilang binili sa amin. Pero yung prinisinta sa amin, na likwidasyon ng NGO, lumalabas po doon hundreds of thousands or even millions of pesos for the same receipts, no? In any event, marami rin po kaming natuklasan na mga questionable receipts. Doon lang po sa kanilang authority to print the receipts, no? Iba-ibang number na yon o kaya yung series na yon nawala na. Parang may mga badges po kasi malalaman natin kung ang isang resibo ay totoo o hindi, no? Siguro magiging interesado din po ang ating Commission of Internal Revenue, ang Bureau of Internal Revenue dito po sa mga audit findings namin na ito. Marami rin po dun sa mga suppliers ay wala naman pong maipakitang business permits. Pinuntahan din po namin ang kanilang mga respective local government units para i-verify, baka naman nakarehistro sila, hindi naman din po sila nakarehistro, no? Minsan yung mga iba wala ring rehistro sa SEC at sila nga ay nag-issue ng mga questionable receipts at marami sa mga NGOs were being managed or owned by the same persons. Isa pa ho, yung mga NGOs, meron din po kaming natuklasan na mga about 123 million that were used by some of the NGOs for payment of salaries nila and other administrative expenses. So parang ang bayan ang nagpasweldo sa kanilang mga tauhan. Many of the listed beneficiaries, mapunta naman tayo dun sa mga beneficiaries kasi dun sa liquidasyon nila, kailangan nilang ipakita o saan napunta yung project na yan. Diba? So meron silang mga sinubmit na mga listahan ng mga beneficiaries, no? Marami po doon sa mga nakalista, nag-deny, naku, hindi, wala po kami natatanggap yan. Okay? O kaya, mga iba namatay na. O yung mga iba, mga pangalan na hindi naman pala dun, they're not residents of the area. They are not even registered voters kasi hiningi din po namin ng assistance ng ating mga local COMELEC registrars para ma-validate kung yung mga pangalan na nakalista doon ay mga botante ng distrito. At karamihan po ay hindi. At ito ho siguro, ako talaga nung nakita ko ito kung si Cardinal Tagle po ay naluha, ako po ay nakahagulgol. Kasi may mga listahan po na ang mga pangalan ay kinuha po sa listahan ng mga pumasa ng board, ng bar, ganon. At we were able to compare the lists, no? The purported beneficiaries were also listed many number of times for the same trainings that were allegedly conducted. So, yung mga detalye, as I said, you will find them here. No? Doon naman po sa implementation ng infra, okay? May mga proyekto po kaming nakita that were deficient or overpriced. Pag sinabi po natin deficient, ang ibig sabihin, not to specifications, among other things, no? Or overpriced, no? Or were subject to split contracts. Kasi ho, meron hong patakaran o alituntunin na up to a certain amount, medyo, I think 5 million and below, there is a certain component of the cost that will be higher than if the contract were for a bigger amount, no? So meron po kaming mga kontrata na halimbawa isang kalye lang naman, dinugtong-dugtong lang yung mga kontratista, no? Para bumaba doon, para umabot doon sa 5 million and below. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, pwede silang maka-charge ng mas malaking cost component. Okay? Around 90 projects were either not utilized or fully utilized or in a state of deterioration, indicating that the funds could have been used for more urgently needed infrastructure. It's either, ito po yung mga tinatawag nating mga white elephants. Hindi naman po talaga ganun ang pangangailangan, pero ginagawa pa rin. Okay? 54 projects costing 161.5 million were constructed on private lots without any document showing the turnover of such properties to the government. Again, nakadetalya po itong mga proyekto na ito. May mga pictures po kaming linagay dito kung ano itong 54 projects na yan. Now, on the financial assistance and other charges by the LGUs, we found that disbursements amounting to 1.29 billion involved several procurements that were not compliant with RA 9184. Walang bidding, in other words. We also found transactions which were denied by the purported suppliers or suppliers of dubious existence and goods purportedly procured pero hindi naman po accounted for. Hindi po maipakita sa amin o maituro sa amin nung tinanong namin nasaan itong mga naka-record dito na pinili. Okay? Funds were also used for the regular operations of the LGUs. Hindi po doon nakalaan ang financial assistance to LGUs, no? Yung regular operations, hindi dapat manggaling sa PDAF, no? As well as other government offices and even offices of some congressional districts. Financial assistance to various organizations and individuals were granted without establishing the need and for purposes not covered in the GAA menu. And these were granted in substantial amounts. Meron din pong disbursement vouchers and other supporting documents for 250 million worth of reported procurement or outlay could not be submitted to us despite repeated requests. Sa kabuuan po, medyo mahaba-haba ng konti ang aming audit recommendations dito. Nandito po rin sa aming report. We issued a host of recommendations, including the recommendation for the DBM to issue specific and stringent guidelines on the utilization of PDAF and the participation of NGOs, if at all. We also recommended that legislators should limit their participation to the identification of projects and ensure na itong mga proyekto na ito na kanilang gustong gawin are eligible under the terms and provisions of the COA. For representatives in particular, we recommended that they should likewise limit their project coverage within their respective districts or sectors in the case of party list. Kasi ho, ang reason for being ng PDAF, di ba nga, para mabenepisyohan po yung kanilang mga constituencies. Pero lumalabas naman po sa kanilang mga distrito yung supposedly allocation nila. No? The blacklisting of erring NGOs and the immediate investigation of all persons involved, as well as the filing of appropriate administrative and criminal charges were also recommended. So, dito po nagtatapos ang aking report. For the details of the audit findings and recommendations, ayan, alas 3 daw, pwede nyo na hong i-access sa web ng COA web. At ito po ay ang COA Special Audits Office Report number 2012-03. Maraming salamat po at ako po ay nandito sa inyong disposal for any questions.